Robots Radio presents...
Today's chat is brought to you by the support of all our Twitch subscribers. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through the Twitch platform, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a subscriber of the FFC and gaining access to some exclusive features over in the Discord server, please be sure to visit our Twitch account and click on the subscribe button. If you're an Amazon Prime member, remember that you do have a free subscription to Twitch every month that can be used for this. And for those of you who are already subscribers, thank you again for your generosity.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on August 7th, 2020 over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat as we continue our discussion over the information leading up to Halo Infinite. This particular episode will serve as what we have come to call the advanced session of the week's exploration. Congratulations to those who signed up for a deeper dive. Before we go any further, however, let's run through a quick introduction of who all we have with us on the show. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86.
And this is the now educated about dust dogs, green-eyed zombie dust dogs.
Zombie dust dogs.
I now know that catnip is bad for dogs.
It's bad for dogs. Hold on to your butts.
Can't take you anywhere.
And nope, you can't. And last but definitely not in least, Zahn, guest host. I can't even get through the sentence.
He's broken. Oh gosh.
We have our good friend pensHALO. Pens, how are you doing?
You make
okay,
it sound
so
like
anyways,
drinking.
moving on.
We're not drinking.
No, we're all naturally like this.
To be fair, this is pretty much a standard Halo night for us. So.
Oh my goodness.
Anyone who's, for all you poor that have listened to all 5 of them, I'm sorry. But yeah.
Sorry, not sorry. So, who are the Banished, Pens?
Okay. The Banished are, as we found in the trailer, or the game demo for Halo Infinite, the Banished are going to be the primary antagonists that we're going to fight against. The Banished were actually introduced in Halo Wars 2. They are a faction of primarily Eurohane brutes that rebelled against the Covenant. The group is led by a Eurohane war chieftain by the name of Atriox. I'm going to kind of run through the summary here, but there's actually a cutscene from Halo Wars 2 that it gives an excellent summary, and I'll go ahead and just drop that there into the Twitch chat, but it's really, really good. So you can't talk about Atriox and the Banished are tied together, so we're just going to kind of run with that from here. Atriox was born into the Covenant. Once he became of age, he joined the Covenant and became known for his strategic genius and tenaciousness. The Covenant realized this, and to help take advantage of it, he and his packmates during the Human Covenant War were under the command of a Sangheili Silent Shadow. The Silent Shadow are essentially Sangheili assassins. And their primary goal was the hunting and slaying of demons. And that meant Spartan 2s.
Yeah.
As they were known in the Covenant.
I just remember hearing grunts scream at demons being us. That is my... Mm-hmm. And that's right before they cheered, yay! Because I popped their head off.
Followed by the pop, or actually the pop first, then you get the yay.
Yeah.
Grunt birthday party's a great skull.
Best
anyway,
Easter egg ever.
So anyway, he served loyally for a long period of time, but at some point in time, the Covenant started using his clan as frontline troops, essentially as fodder. The idea that they were to break the UNSC lines. So they would send them 40 at a time and to be the vanguard to break the line, and then there'd be a follow-up. But the 40 would die. They would die 40 at a time. And in many cases, the battle had been decided and they were still doing this. This happened time and time and time again until the thing is, Atriox was the only one who started coming back from these. He would go out with 39 other of his packmates. He's the only one who'd come back. Again, this happened so many times that eventually he lost faith in the Great Journey, which was the whole religious basis of the Covenant. At the same time, though, because he kept coming back, he kept surviving, his legend started to grow, specifically among the Eurohane, but among other members of the Covenant as well. The prophets saw Atriox as a threat now. So, on a planet named Algolis, they sent 40 of them out. He came back. At this point in time, he came across a single wounded Marine. He let him try to get away from him, but the Marine was wounded, couldn't make it. So just before he killed the Marine, he went ahead and expressed severe disdain and hatred for the Covenant and essentially stated he didn't believe in it anymore. Another Eurohane heard this and challenged him for heresy, and Atriox killed him. When Atriox turned back to the base, there was a Sangheili executioner, which was essentially a senior in the Silent Shadow, and sentenced Atriox to death for betraying a member of his pack. Atriox, and you can actually see this in the video, he drops his hammer, falls to his knees. The Sangheili lights his energy sword and goes to stab him in the face. Atriox stops him by raising his hand and capturing the sword, which actually cuts into the side of his hand. He then kills the executioner that was going to kill him, which led his packmates who were still present to take action against the other Sangheili. So at that point in time, that's when the Banished were born. At the beginning, it was mainly just Eurohane that came to his side, although there was some Ungoi, the grunts, who were there as well. The early years of the Banished was all guerrilla warfare. Mm-hmm. They primarily raided Covenant stockpiles, but they also raided some Covenant, some UNSC. This is around 2550, and this is about the time the UNSC actually heard of Atriox. It was from a grunt that they had captured, who went on and on about about essentially this war leader who didn't have any religious fervor, but he led because troops knew what he wanted and what he stood for, rather than, and that inspired the loyalty.
That's just, I'm sorry, the whole idea of a grunt being the chatterbox is so surprising. So surprising.
Isn't it though?
I'm sorry, like, anybody who's spent any time in Halo hears those guys just gossiping like old women at a coffee shop.
What's even better is in Halo 5, there's a couple of them who are sitting around the Sword of Sanghelios, and it's just amazing.
That particular scene, we've all seen the videos of a young pup messing around with an old dog, and the older pups just kind of look at it, sitting there going, "Yeah, whatever, kid." That is played out in one of the hub scenes in Halo 5. If you go wandering around, you will find this.
It's so amazing.
They're sitting on a cliff. They're overlooking which actually a pretty nice, beautiful looking scene. And you just hear the grunt going on and on and on and on. And every now and again, you hear this grunt from the Sangheili.
Oh no!
It's amazing.
It's priceless.
So the grunt basically gives up the information a little bit about it, going on and on and saying, there's this guy, he's not tied to the religion like everybody else is, but he stands for something, he has a belief, and he's got purpose, he's got drive, so we're gonna do this kind of thing with him. That's where they kind of start banding up, or?
Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much where it kind of started. Like I said, the UNSC at that point in time was more concerned with defeating the Covenant. They weren't interested in a faction. They actually would have probably been more saying, okay, fine, internal division in the Covenant. Sure. Great, that helps us.
Right.
They kind of did that with the Arbiter.
Yeah. So once the Covenant actually fell apart in 2553, this actually allowed a lot of remaining Covenant to come to Atriox's side. This gave him a huge fleet. This gave him a large number of troops. This included a Covenant, a Sangheili assault carrier, which is one of the largest ships in the Covenant, was one of the largest ships in the Covenant fleet, and named the Enduring Conviction, along with its experienced Sangheili crew. Over the next 8 years, through raiding and pillaging and whatnot, and stealing, they became, like I said, an extremely large power. This all came to 8 years later, where they went ahead and attacked the Lesser Ark. Now, when you're talking about Halo, the Lesser Ark are the places are the forges by which where the Halos are made.
Okay.
The idea was Atriox wanted to go there and create a Halo ring, so he could use that in his conquests. He didn't have any luck with this, and then in 2559, that's when the Spirit of Fire arrives at the Ark and fight the Banished, and end up fighting, and they beat him to the Halo ring, like I mentioned in the intro episode. And along this time, as most people, if you've played Halo 3, you know that on the Lesser Ark, the city of High Charity crash landed on it, and when it was infected by the flood. So the Lesser Ark had a flood infection that had been isolated. Well, because of a couple of mistaken Yolohane, a flood outbreak occurred, but they were able to contain that and stop it from going through. And then also at this time, the Banished had to deal with an Ungoi rebellion led by Yap Yap. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So the Yap Yap, is that
Yap Yap.
the giant grunt that we fight that's in the mech?
No.
In Warzone?
Well, I think there is one that is Yap Yap.
I believe so, but this was Yap Yap the Destroyer.
It's like, okay.
He was a low-ranking deacon in the Covenant's Ministry of Sanitation before being kidnapped by the
so
Banished.
he dealt with all the time. Got it. Okay, so
Yes.
he's just
He was
he's
an
a sewer
Ungoi.
grunt. God,
Was this was this the rebellion that was because they were shorted breathing methane, or was that was under the Covenant?
No, that was under the Covenant that
under the
occurred.
Covenant, okay. Because I remember there was that one. They were deliberately shorting them breathing methane because they're like, it's got population control, and the Ungois understandably got a little pissed about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking like, okay, Yap Yap. My first thought was Jub Jub from Star Wars.
You're not wrong.
But if Jub Jub actually led a rebellion.
I mean, he kind of did.
Kind of, but like he didn't talk all the time.
No, he didn't.
Yap Yap probably talked all the time, as says his name, because he's a Yap Yapper.
I mean, she's not wrong.
No, she's not.
But it's not just Yap Yap. It's Yap Yap the Destroyer.
The Destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
This is all I can picture is a gnome barbarian. Is all I
just
and
right.
or a
I just
halfling
want
barbarian.
somebody. I want a 5th grader who hears the name Yap Yap the Destroyer to draw it, because you're gonna get the strangest
Whip
cartoon.
Squad, go!
Right?
Oh, and of course, he is also the impetus behind Yappening. Which
Wait.
is
And green's broken.
it's an in-game kind of thing where essentially for a period of time Yap Yap makes inroads to the game and wreaks havoc in game with like silly game types and game functionality.
The Yappening, like
yes.
he's a
You can't
terrible
say
villain,
that
but
Halo
also-
multiplayer doesn't take itself super seriously.
That is brilliant.
I threw the link to the Yappening in Halopedia. and I'll give it to Blue so he can go ahead and put it in the show notes. Please go read it and just know that
I'm sorry.
Halo does not take itself seriously on this, and it is great.
The best part is the Master
image.
Chief Collection. The Master Chief Collection screen when it happens. It's a giant
that's what I'm
grunt in
looking
the
at. Like, that's the first thing that
constellation.
caught my eye. Is just this, like, glorious shadow grunt kind of thing. Just arms out, like, and it's
So the only thing I remember, because I play SWAT all the time with Halo. So when you play on Yappening, last year at least, they have what's called the head pop party. It's SWAT. But it's got the grunt birthday party Easter egg on it.
oh nice.
So all you hear is pop, yay!
The entire game, it was like everyone's KD dropped because everyone is just dying laughing the entire
That's
time.
awesome.
It's just,
I'm sorry.
Oh, and by the way, in the Master Chief Collection is called the Yappening, 2 yaps this time.
Oh no.
Yes.
Okay. That's clever.
Okay.
I like that one. Crisscross. Back to the thing.
Okay, so that's kind of back on target here. So that's really the summary of Atriox and the Banished there. Essentially, it is they're pretty much at this point in time nearly as powerful as the Covenant was, except, like I said, they're not religiously motivated. They're motivated by a charismatic leader, which actually makes them more dangerous in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the other Yorlhane that we need to discuss is a brute war chief by the name of Escharum. This is the one that gets introduced to us in the Halo Infinite trailer.
Mm-hmm.
The one set a fire in your heart, Spartan. Is that the last line is actually really, really good. We don't have a lot of information on him. All that we know is that he's a war chief, and when Atriox led troops to the Lesser Ark, he rose in power to the remaining Banished that were left. And it is this group that discovered Installation 07 and defeated the UNSC in 2559.
Okay.
So, from the trailer,
Mm-hmm.
or the clip at the end of the gameplay demo, he seems like he is someone who fights, who lives to fight, who is always looking for the next challenge. Just based upon the way he spoke, because there are lines in there that seem to indicate that for a long time he didn't have any motivation because there was no one worthy to fight him, and then all of a sudden, here's this demon. Although, how did he put it? Like the UNSC calls them Spartans. The Covenant called him demon. To the Banished, he's prey.
Oh gosh. Okay.
So,
yeah.
And it's, like I said, it's somebody who seems to be highly motivated when there's someone who he sees as an equal in combat. And he wants to measure himself against someone who is his equal. And that's the kind of what I kind of see from him,
cool.
in there. So,
okay. So, Blue just threw in a factoid. Is that the guy playing Escharum? Is that how you say his name?
Escharum.
Escharum is the same guy who plays Callus and Reinhardt, and I did not realize that Darren DePaul played Callus.
Yeah, and actually, John DiMaggio is the voice actor for Atriox, who is, if I remember this correctly off the top of my head, Banshee.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I actually know Darren DePaul a little bit better because I love watching him. He's a very charismatic voice actor who does all the Reinhardt stuff at
Yeah,
cons.
he can also uncannily switch into Reinhardt voice
crazy
quick.
Yeah. Yep. Awesome. Okay, so that's actually a good place to stop before we dive into a little bit more on Installation 07 and or Halo Ring, whatever it is. I feel like I've been put in a blender. My brain has a little bit. There are contents in there that are recognizable, and I'm starting to get a coalescence of something that could be a smoothie eventually, but right now it's still...
She's still recovering from the yappening.
That one's having a hard time. But let's take a quick break before we jump into that.
In a world where solid-state electronics and vacuum tubes are still meta, people never stop loving atomic-powered everything. A chosen 500 stepped inside a subterranean vault to be spared the nuclear horror of the inevitable Great War. 25 years later, they emerge after the fallout settles to retake Appalachia. Among them, two former rivals whose blood feud will tear West Virginia apart in their epic struggle for survival. Chad, a vault bro who has a strength of 15, an intelligence of 2, and is a complete wasteland head. Simon, a complicated anti-hero who chooses light and hope, but accidentally becomes a cannibal and wakes up naked and afraid with a Scorch Beast queen after a date goes terribly wrong. What? I mean, it's a wild wasteland, right? This dark humor radio drama will have you driving off the road and crawling out from under the fallout. 2 men, 1 wasteland, and so many nukes. Chad, a Fallout 76 podcast, rated R, now streaming on your holotape player podcasty thing.
So, okay, moving past the yappening, moving past the Reinhardt voice and everything else going on with that, there are other things that are possibly coming forward within Infinite or going to come forward that it's just like, okay, when was Chief woken up? Chief hasn't been woken up. He's still in the thing, isn't he? Like, that didn't happen at the end of Halo 5 he's still entombed-ish?
No. Well, kind of with the trailer that was released in E3 last year, what we see is Chief is floating in space, and his Mjolnir armor kind of is locked down to protect him.
Okay.
That is a new version of Mjolnir. It was introduced in 2559. So we know that he wasn't like in cryo at some point in time. Well, I shouldn't say that. We know that he has his new armor, so we know at some point in time he was either en route or heading to Installation 07. Just as a side note, there's a novel coming out later this year called Shadows of Reach. It takes place in October of 2559, and it's Blue Team returning back to Reach because of something that Halsey says is needed to try to combat Cortana.
Okay.
We don't know any other details. So that takes place, I think, a month or so before essentially the loss to the Banished. So we don't, I'm kind of what my hope is that, and the novel will be written by Troy Denning, who's done a great job in the other 2 novels with Master Chief that he's done. He's picked up the mantle that Nyland set exceedingly well. Excuse me. So what I'm hoping is that and the other thing is that mission, we know it's not at the beginning. They said that it's about 3 to 4 hours into gameplay.
Okay.
Where that particular mission happens. So there's definitely something more ahead of it. And part of it, I would assume what I'm hoping is we have information of how Chief got there. Was he on a ship that was destroyed? It seems like he was en route to 07. and not 07 and not on the ring itself because he's unaware of the loss that occurred. So, and also in one of the other cutscenes at the end of the gameplay trailer, you see him in the Pelican with the pilot who most of the Halo, well, all of the Halo community has affectionately called Brohammer.
Okay.
I still
Brohammer.
wish that was Mashak. I'm not gonna lie. I
I'm
was
not
hoping,
gonna, yeah,
like
that
when
would
I
be-
first heard him, I was like, and then it was like, no, it's not him. But
No, back in Halo 1, the name of the pilot of the Pelican who always shuttled you all over the place was FoeHammer.
Oh, gotcha.
And as a side note, in the script for the Halo movie, and yes, there was an actual script for a Halo movie, it was implied that Chief and FoeHammer had some type of relationship.
Oh, really?
Yep.
fanfiction.net. What?
All right then.
Well, I mean, it was very loosely, or they were very close friends at the very least.
I mean, considering how Chief doesn't really. Anyway, I'm gonna move on from that.
Yes.
Okay.
So, in any event, the Halo community started because we didn't have the pilot's name. Mm-hmm. So they started calling him Brohammer.
As you do.
Yeah, as you do. So, that's kind of where, and I totally lost my train of thought.
Sorry. Okay.
No, it's
you
okay.
have possibility of Brohammer shuttling Chief to the installation, but if that's just a theory at the moment, or do we, like you said, that wasn't kind of sort of in the trailer that everyone at E3?
Yes. Yeah, at the E3 trailer, you see the pilot kind of clean shaven. You figure he's kind of drifting in space. He's fairly clean, so you figure this probably isn't that long after, I guess, the initial battle.
Okay.
And then the way the scene goes is you see, there's like a little holographic thing that's, I guess, his wife and his kid talking, and it kind of circles it, and you can kind of see that it has a ring that shows how much charge is in the battery, and it's draining. Mm-hmm. And when it goes all the way back around, you see him with a full beard, and like he looks like he hasn't had a shave and a haircut in probably a couple of months.
Sure.
There's an alert, a beeping outside of it detecting something. He thinks it's someone coming to save him, and he starts trying to call out. He wipes the frost off the window, and that's when you see Chief floating outside. Mm-hmm. He brings him in, charges the suit back up. We also get, and the other thing in the boot screen that appears, there's if you stop it and you look, there's something called Spider, SPDR. That is actually a reference to something that occurred in I Love Bees, which was the ARG for Halo 3.
Yeah, Halo 3 was the ARG for I Love Bees.
Essentially, it is a program used to recompile an AI that has been damaged.
Okay, then.
And also in that particular, in what someone else found in that boot sequence was a barcode, or a QR code, I should say, that when you scan, took you to a piece of audio that was Jen Taylor as Cortana saying, "This is a piece of me, but, this is familiar. It's a piece of me." And it sounds much younger than what you were used to Cortana being. So some people believe that we have either Halsey creates another Cortana clone from her brain. Right. Or, and we're going to harken back to the 2 Halo ones ago when we talked about Halsey's journal. Right. The reason Cortana is so different from other smart AI is that normally when you create a smart AI, it is from a human brain, but it's someone who's deceased. Right. Halsey created Cortana by cloning her own brain and then mapping all of her, like the brain patterns over, and then generated it. Now, the thing is, she didn't just generate one. I think she generated a dozen clone brains. So it's possible that what Chief and Blue Team do is they go to Reach to recover one of the brains to allow another Cortana to be created.
So where is Halsey at this point?
Her last position would have been on the would have been on Sanghelios. At the end of Halo 5, as I mentioned before, the final cutscene is Team Osiris and Blue Team coming off of a Pelican and meeting up with the Arbiter, Sarah Palmer, and Halsey. And the final line is a line from Halsey. It says, "Took you long enough," when she's speaking directly to John. Because this would have been the first time in, let's see, 2552, 8 years. This would have been the first time in 8 years that Halsey and John have been together.
Okay.
And I so want a story of that meeting.
Like when they meet back up for the first time?
That's kind of just left out there. There's nothing specific. It's touched on in the book Bad Blood, which focuses mainly on Buck. All he says is they kind of, like, Blue Team went off with Halsey and they talked about something, but there's nothing specific. But,
okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of, I mean, there is some supposition, there is some thought that we have another Cortana clone to either try to recompile or absorb the rampant Cortana in, or to defeat it, or do something, which would kind of parallel the whole mendicant bias and offensive bias. Mendicant bias was a Forerunner AI that got turned to the Flood and betrayed the Forerunners for the Flood. The Forerunners created offensive bias to defeat mendicant bias. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that the UNSC is going to create a Cortana clone AI to defeat the rampant Cortana that is the leader of the created.
Okay, so Cortana is will the Cortana, if she isn't absorbing the quote unquote bad Cortana, who is not the Cortana we used to know, because she's somebody we now I have that song in my head. If the Cortana that we see in Infinite does not do any sort of absorption or anything like that, do we think that Chief and her are going to be, I mean, they're going to be compatible because they were compatible prior, because they were initially put together, but that's got to be painful for Chief because she wouldn't have any of those memories necessarily. She would be a blank slate. Yeah,
and there's right after, in Halo 4, right after, and the mission is called Composer. At the end of it, after Chief survives, you see Cortana, like, crouched on the pedestal with essentially her head in her arms, and Chief wakes up, and she says in there, you know, they'll pair you with another AI. They may even give you another Cortana model, but it won't be me. You know that, right? It's at that point that I think, and maybe I'm reading into this, but it's at that point that I see Cortana realizing that the odds of her coming out the other side are slim to none. Now, Chief is the one who essentially believes he can still win. And fun fact, Halo 4 is the first time that you as Chief lose, because the mission, the overriding mission of Halo 4 wasn't to defeat the Didact, it was to get Cortana back to Earth to get her healed, fixed, however you want to phrase it. And that didn't happen.
Right.
Because that was the whole thing, was he was trying to get back to Halsey, because the entire time Halo 4 he was Halsey will have an answer. Halsey will fix this. Halsey will fix this. Halsey will know what to do. Which is why the ending was so painful, you know, as you guys were talking about, because that's where the line that he, like, I think it's Lasky actually makes a comment about like which one's more machine and which one's more human with Chief, and it's just it was so interesting that dynamic.
Chief says that it's our duties as soldiers, and Lasky comes back with the phrase something to the fact that he's like, you say that like soldiers and humans are not human, and we're not, or that soldiers are machines. And his last line is, "She said that to me once about being a machine."
Because Chief is always the machine.
Choked up just talking about it again.
Chief was always the machine, and Cortana was always the human heart of the pair.
Yes.
And so that was like the whole thing was like Halo 4, and with Halo 5 too, is like that's the conflict that Chief has, is he's being forced to grow as a character, to not have to depend on the whole someone else telling him what to do. He has to make some of his he makes his own choices like that. I'm not saying that, but like he makes choices in the moment, which is what Chief, like, and they talk about this in Hunt the Truth. Like, he's very, very, very good at making split-second choices and making the right choice. And he's always been that. But he's not
emotionally driven. He's logically driven. That's the machine aspect,
it's
right?
actually even like, there's that, but it's also, he doesn't operate on a big picture. He operates in, he's a very much squad-oriented, individual-oriented decision maker. Okay. Whereas Cortana was always the one being like, okay, we got to go there, so now we have to do this, and this. And she would set like counterpoints to him.
Yeah.
But Chief would be like, okay, I can't get here by path A, so I'm going to go to path B, or whatever. He would get to the checkpoints, but Cortana was the one that was setting the end goal, or Lasky became the next one that was setting the end goal. And then we see, like, that's like Halo 4 and Halo 5, you start seeing different characters kind of take on the role of Cortana in trying to drive that. And that's where at the end of Halo 4 it was so hard, because it's basically the Band-Aid gets ripped away, and he's left there kind of hanging with the fact that like, there is no one who is showing him the big picture anymore.
And I know this is a little bit off tangent, but the thing with Chief and Cortana is you have to remember they weren't paired until 2552, literally just before the fall of Reach. So
was it right before, or was it after? I thought it wasn't it.
No, nope. Mm-mm. It was in the book, The Fall of Reach.
Oh, in the book, yeah, okay, that's right. John
is paired with Cortana essentially a few months before Halo CE. Because there was the scene in there about Ackerson making them run an obstacle course.
And that is
that. Oh my God, I forgot that scene.
using the armor, or getting ready to use the armor.
Yeah, that's actually when he got the updated Mjolnir armor.
Yeah,
too.
Right.
That's also when you saw how scary Cortana could be when she gets territorial about Chief.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, but But in any event, but the other thing is that, and anyway, I'm not down this tangent. Let me just finish this off. The thing is, there was only one of the Spartan 2. Halsey saw all the Spartan 2s as her children, which was kind of messed up because she didn't have a relationship with her own daughter. But she saw all of the Spartans as her children. But the one she had the greatest connection with was John.
Mm-hmm.
So it is not that far to believe, because the way she created Cortana as a direct clone, that the clone would also have that connection to John. The other thing is that when Halsey had Cortana choose a Spartan to be paired with, she chose John. She actually modified her own processing buffer to essentially make her like 99% compatible with John. So even though they were paired for a very short period of time, you essentially have two entities that are essentially totally compatible with one another.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a surprise that the two of them bonded like they did. I mean, it's not a romantic love, but there is love there.
Well, the way it's just depicted in Halo 4, It's almost as if there is there's quite the codependency, between the two of them. John needs Cortana in a lot of ways throughout the Halo 4 stories. And then you see that Cortana in a lot of ways also needs John, because you see her meltdown and her breakdown.
Well, and John is her strength at those times too.
Right.
Like, I think it makes me think of like the four types of love: the eros, the storge, the agape, and the philia. And this I would say this is more like a philia, which is like the love of friends and equals. Because I mean, and it's almost agape. Like, I mean, it almost is, because it's just like they operate on the same page, like without thinking, like, without even realizing it.
Right.
Yeah.
So may I redirect our little tangent a bit?
Yes.
So what I'd like to get into is probably the thing that most people are most excited about, which I think you mentioned at the beginning, and I want to take a quick ad break before we jump into the Halo ring that we're heading to.
Have you ever wondered how deep the Elder Scrolls lore rabbit hole goes? Have you got a grasp of the basics and want to find out more about the universe? Written in Uncertainty is here to help you. We'll be mixing in philosophy, theology, and whatever other theory is useful with Elder Scrolls texts to untangle some of the biggest questions in the series, like what are dragon breaks, how does Chim work, where did the Dwemer go, and more. Check us out at writteninuncertainty.com or find Written in Uncertainty on any podcatcher. Thanks for listening, and catch you later in the Grey Maybe of Tamriel.
All right, so moment that everybody's been waiting for. What do we know about Site-07?
Okay, there's a lot, frankly, but I'll try to give the cliff notes on this. And okay, so the one thing you have to remember about the Halo rings is that all of them were built at facilities known as the Ark. Now, the thing is, there were two Ark facilities, a greater Ark and a lesser Ark. The bulk of the Halo rays that we come across in game were all created at the lesser Ark. They all have a diameter of 10,000 kilometers. However, the ones that were created on the greater Ark actually were 3 times bigger. They had a diameter of 30,000 kilometers. There were initially 12 of the Halo array that were from the greater Ark, and then there were 6 that were from the lesser Ark. The other difference is the lesser Ark pulses, when they fired, were omnidirectional. They would go in all directions. The greater Ark would only fire in a conical form.
Right.
So, Installation 07 originally was one of the 12 that were manufactured at the greater Ark.
So it fires one direction only?
Originally, yes. Yeah. Yes. So this is the location that also had a large number of after the human Forerunner War, a large number of humanity was devolved, which is probably the best way to essentially to make them pre-technological, and they actually lived in certain places in Forerunner sites, and one of the main sites was Installation 07. It had a huge human population. Now, one of the other things about 07 was this was the site that when Mendicant Bias, essentially, this was the ring that eventually held the Primordial, which, long story short, was essentially the very first grave mind. It was a flood. It was a flood grave mind.
Okay.
This is the thing that actually, after 40 some years of discussion, turned Mendicant Bias against the Forerunners. It also was the one where, in the Human Covenant War, it was found that the reason the humans were pushing into Forerunner space was because the flood was attacking them. But the flood turned around and stopped. Well, it ended up that they thought that humanity had genetically modified like 1/3 of its population and essentially fed them to the Flood, and they thought that's what stopped it. So, and then of course with that done, and after what the Forerunners did to humanity in devolving them, the Flood started coming after the Forerunners. So the Forerunners wanted to figure out what the humans did. Mm-hmm. Well, they used 07 as a site to test humans for what genetic part of the humanity will allow the Flood to be stopped. So this all happens in Halo Primordium, which is the second book in the Forerunner series. Essentially, the Forerunners perform a lot of horrific acts against the humans there to try to figure out why they, how they were able to turn the Flood back. Neo, the Palace of Pain was the name given to the site where this testing occurred by the humans who were living on the ring. It ended up that the Master Builder, who was the one who had decided to perform these acts, he was put on trial by the Forerunners. It ended up that Mendicant Bias brought all of the original 12 Halo array to the homeworld of the Forerunner to essentially destroy him. It was during this time that he got stopped, essentially by a clone of the Didact, which is another story altogether. Short answer. Forerunners have the ability to imprint themselves on other Forerunners to allow them to mature. It's like it's a maturing rate. The Didact, before he got driven mad, actually left his imprint on another Forerunner by the name of Born Stellar. Born Stellar Last Eternal was his name, and he became essentially a copy of the Didact. This copy of the Didact was able to halt the attack on the Forerunner homeworld to an extent, and during this, one of the safety features of the ring was when they came under attack, they would escape. So when 07 went to escape, it ended up getting destroyed, and it essentially the Forerunners reconfigured it to shrink it down from a 30,000 kilometer array to a 10,000 kilometer array, and adjusted its firing so it would be omnidirectional, not a conical firing.
So even though it's part of the original 12, it functions and looks mostly like the newer ones that we deal with, that are the omnidirectional arrays that we deal with originally. Okay, so why did they shrink it down? To try to hide it, possibly, or?
Because a huge section got damaged when it was escaping. So instead of and they had lost, at that point in time, no, they hadn't lost the greater arc yet, but they couldn't repair it at the greater arc. So they just essentially said, okay, we're going to lop this section off and shrink it down.
They basically resized it for a wedding ring. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's how we got all the Lego sets.
Well, actually, Neo mentions it in chat that part of the safety thing to try to prevent it from falling into enemy hands was to essentially send it crashing into a planet. However, Mendicant Bias was able to change it so it would pass around the planet, not through it, but there was enough gravitational shearing that took place that damaged it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what, and it ended up getting shrunk in that. So pretty much, and then again, it was then renamed 07 to make it the 7th of the 10,000 array, 10,000 kilometer diameter array. It went through its firing sequence whenever when the Didact, the copy Didact fired.
The ISO Didact.
Actually, his ISO Didact the Ore Didact was the one that was driven mad by the Flood. That's the one we came across in Halo 4. The ISO Didact was the good one, his copy.
Okay.
He was the one who actually initiated the firing of the Halo array. And Installation 07 was the last one to be found. Like I said, it was 2553. And the UNSC had actually, sent people there to research it. And the thing is with 07, because it's originally was a 30,000 diameter and it got shrunk, the maps of like how the other 6 array were built really don't apply to it. So that's why you kind of see the landscape look totally different from any other Halo array that we've come across so far. Mm-hmm. Because it is so old. It is hundreds of thousands of years older than the other Halo array that we've been on, which from a story perspective leads to huge possibilities. I mean, there was also 10 proto grave mines that were supposed to be on that ring. There were supposed to be a number of different monitors there on that ring. You have the Palace of Pain, which is where all the testing came done. You have the chamber where the Primordial was stored. Now, what the ISO Didact did with the Primordial was essentially sped up time, and so essentially the Primordial broke down into dust. So it's
just don't bring dogs around it.
No,
just don't feed the dogs the dust.
Exactly, you're fine.
Just don't. Okay, so
that's kind of the real quick and dirty of it.
Okay.
There's a lot more.
So there's a ton of story potential is what I'm hearing from having all those different possible antagonists.
Well, it's not just
up.
antagonist either. It's the like the Lifeworker central hub is on it. So I mean, like there's a host of information as well that they could take and go their own way.
I'm sorry. One of the things that I thought was most interesting that caught my ear a little bit was when you had mentioned the Palace of Pain specifically having modified, because this was you said it was tested on humans, modified humans that we've never dealt with before. Like the possibility of that is really intriguing to me.
Yeah, I mean, part of it was the Forerunners doing their testing, and then at one point in time, they were essentially exposing them to the Flood, too. So,
well, and that's also when you got to see the beacons, like mind controlling, or not mind controlling, but subduing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the interesting thing about this one is that it has the Lifeworker beacons, which are basically devices that were embedded across the ring. Do the other rings have beacons on them? I'm assuming they do, right? I can't remember right now. But anyway, so like beacons are basically the devices that it basically it with a subtle it basically hijacks entities, what they refer to as Gias, which is basically their instincts, and you can control them through that. So it's a really interesting kind of manipulation of like an instinctual sense of a being by the Lifeworkers or the Forerunners to control them, which is how they were able to control them with the Palace of Pain. They actually would just round them up and just basically herd them with these beacons.
Yeah, I mean that one is specifically mentioned on 07, but I don't think I've seen it referenced on any other ring. So, but that's kind of, I mean, that's what, like I said before, that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to finding out is the history. That ring is unlike any other ring that we've come across. And admittedly, there's Alpha and Delta Halo, which is the rings from CE and 2 respectively. This ring is totally different, which, like I said, brings up so many different possibilities. And that's really one of the really neat things that I'm really looking forward to on that. So I'm
out of questions. I don't know where to go with this. I'm excited to know like the concept of the oldest ring that we have ever experienced is really cool. Like that I'm excited to go see. I'm excited to see the stories that they're going to draw out of it. The fact that there's so many different tie-ins between the flood, even like you mentioned, that the one got turned to dust, which is like, okay, are we going to start that thing all over again? And then the grave mines and everything.
Just bring your vacuum
like,
cleaner.
okay.
We're good.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That does not work. That does not work. I'm sorry. Like anybody who cleans on a regular basis knows that you're not going to get rid of all the dust with a vacuum.
Get rid of most of it, though.
Well, then what you could potentially do is just evacuate the atmosphere and let it all go into space.
Swiffer it.
Of course,
Chat's like, I mean, that's what we do.
But then again, you eject it into space and all of a sudden you'll end up with key mines.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's not how the Force works.
I just, my mind goes to, okay, you vacuum it all up, right? Like, where are you going to put the canister? You can't just throw it in the garbage.
In the sun.
You can't just jettison it.
Just jettison it into
worked
the
on
sun.
zombie dust dogs.
Then it turns into like a rabbit embryo and strikes somebody on the head, killing them, kicking off the whole awoken, like Mara's like trauma as a child.
Nope. Then we dip into Star Wars and get the Sun Crusher.
Yes, all of this.
Boy,
Kip Durin, let's go. All right.
There is a lot of streams being crossed right now.
That's when the fun starts. So anyway, shout outs.
Marshmallow Man.
Oh, tasty.
Yes. Okay, shout outs for the advanced episode. Shout outs to live chat. Shout out also to Miss Reyes, who is in chat, as well as Wicked. Raz in particular, who is back home feeling much better. And then shout out to Wicked, who got a shout out during the episode without even being here, because you're getting blamed for something you didn't even do, but you're still getting blamed for it. So shout out.
Exactly.
I love how she told on us.
Yep, absolutely, because they're here now to hear it.
I was going to tell him anyway.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Besides, he knows he's always at fault.
That's true. Pins, what about you? Do you have any shout outs for the advanced session?
I'm going to give a shout out to 343. And there's a lot going on in the world and whatnot. And I know that they have people there, just like at any major studio, who all they really want to do is put out the best possible game. And having read through some of the reactions of people and frankly some of the stupidity that some people have said and done, I just want to say to them that I can't wait to see what they put out, and I'm going to withhold any judgment on that until I get my hands on it. I just wish them the best, and that whatever they put out, I'm sure that they put their heart behind it. And then also, like I said before, just thanks again for having me on. I know I tend to ramble and kind of start chasing squirrels here and there. But there's a lot of that with the Halo universe. I find myself just going, oh, then there's this, which depends on that, which depends on that. And, just thanks everyone for being patient, for everyone who came out to listen, and who does listen to this. So thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
No, I mean, really, I'm just going to double down on what you said, especially about 343. I know a lot of people love to take sides and make judgments about stuff that they don't do. It's not a simple switch that gets flipped to make these things. And I mean, I agree. I think if you're gonna be judgmental about something, at least give it the decency to wait until you actually experience it. That's my 2 cents. I'm not saying you have to love it, but at least try it out before you knock it. But that, and also, again, big thank you to you for putting you basically put the show together this week. So
Yep.
It was easy for us. We just showed up and hit stream.
I can't remember. I know you said it in the past, like, okay, we're talking Halo. Okay, go ahead. Pence.
Yeah,
you just run with it.
Yeah, go. You got it.
I also am just grateful that you sent me the show notes ahead of time so I could look them over and start looking up some of these names and terms.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed with Skype's little subtext keeping up with the Sang Helios names. Like,
Yeah.
Well, it is Microsoft, so there's probably some Halo fans.
fair.
Fair.
I did not even think about that, but that's fair. That's fair. So as always, thank you for your time, and until next time, remember, with wisdom we conquer, stand strong, stand tall, and keep exploring. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusedFireChat. Links to all our episode archives can be found at www.thelorenetwork.com. Please be sure to email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any comments and or questions for the team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.